Episode 7 starts now.
Seven. We've made it to episode 7, which is super fun and cool. And I think we gotta find some way to pat ourselves on the back. Not that we don't
sure.
all that not that we don't already. Like nice round numbers, or maybe we intentionally go against the grain and pick random not round numbers, right? like instead of
this is episode 6.43 or something like that.
No, but like instead of being hey, it's episode 10, you know what? Episode 12 is a big one. I don't know. It's
time to commemorate episode 26.
Yes. It would be just like the if in the NHL instead of going with 1,000 games played, we get it'd be we're gonna he just hit game 1222. That's the big number. That's the number we celebrate.
The whole pregame ceremony and everything. We're hanging the banner.
To that number.
Yeah. This is we need to not be prisoners of the base 10 system, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Happy to be here this week. As we said, episode 7. Another fun show in store today. We got a guest coming up in about an hour or so. I'm really excited about that one. Some really kind of nerdy stuff, admittedly, that we're going to talk about then. Today, we will have a little bit more Sean and Robert heavy, which is completely, I guess it is our show. So I guess at some point we have to do some of the lifting on the show. So that will be kind of a little bit more of the play today. But as we like to do every week, before we get into anything, I think we should go to the producer notes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. First producer note says right here, and this was actually told to me secondhand by someone, that having Sean flanked by Bruce Boudreau and Robert Tiffin makes Sean's hair look 10 times better than it already does. So that's the main one I had. That just this is I've done a lot in my life by surrounding myself with people who aren't as tall as I am, and I'm not a particularly tall person to begin with. So having the best hair in any trio is always a good way to go. So good planning by you.
It's I bet it's how Jared Bednar feels at most coaches meetings. And Glenn Goldson.
That would have been an epic coaching matchup of hair right there.
Oh yeah, that would have been. We would have had quite the question about it. My biggest producer note, and I'm going to make sure we don't have to use this note next week because I went through and listened. What I do is we put this show on, and then I tend to listen to the show on Wednesday night, kind of listen back to it through the evening on double speed. We sound like chipmunks because I don't think we ever said the name of the show last week.
Oh yeah, I could absolutely believe that too.
So I don't. So welcome to Algorithmically Incorrect Hockey. Last week we
don't even say our names most of the time either. Audio listeners, I'm sure, run across it. They're one of these guys is one of these guys.
Exactly. So I guess producer note on that. I'm Sean Shapiro. This is Algorithmically Incorrect Hockey, and this is Robert Tiffin. So
yes, this is Robert Tiffin. This is good. Yeah, people do listen sometimes. It's good to remember that.
And I think actually it's with the way things work in the world. I love our live audience and our live viewers, and it's a really great way for us to hold ourselves accountable in doing this. But the reality is there are more people who listen on their own time and listen through various podcast platforms. So we do love you as even more, not as more so. If you're watching this show right now, we love you more than anyone else. If you are listening to a podcast later, we love you more. Don't worry, we won't tell. They didn't hear us say that. We added that in.
That's our little secret.
Exactly. So
excellent.
Say the show
I think
of
we've
the name.
improved the production with those notes. Mark it.
Exactly. Say the show of the name. Introduce yourself. I think those are good notes that anyone could really apply to not just our show, any show.
When I worked at elementary school for a while, one of the things we would teach our students to do is when a visitor came into class, if you had a grandparents' day or something, or you had a touring, a candidate to become a new teacher or something was stopping by the classroom, every classroom would have an assigned greeter. And it was their job to stand up, go shake their hand, look the adult in the eye and say, hello, welcome to classroom, 2A. my name is, Jason. We're studying math right now, or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And just look in the eye, introduce yourself, say what's going on. So I could say completely honestly that second graders were doing a better job of what we should have been doing
Yes.
to start this
Yes.
show than we've been doing so far. But I think that's going to change now. So well.
Yes, I think so. I think so. Speaking of second graders, I went to the earlier today. My one potential delay for the show today was we had my son's field trip to the farm today. So we went to the farm, and I know this isn't a baseball show, but I couldn't help but laugh. They had a bunch of goats, and they named one of the goats Scooble, obviously being in the Detroit area. And I texted this picture to because taking my son to the Tigers game on Friday and going with another friend, and his immediate response was, "Well, does that goat already have a plane ticket to LA for the end of the year?" So some baseball humor for the for those and for those who care about it, and for one of us who
how much attention do you pay to other sports like during the hockey season? Because for me, that one nice thing about the summer is that I can finally check back in with baseball a little bit more intently. Like soccer is a little easier because the schedule is so much lighter, where a game is like a once a week event, maybe twice if they're playing in Europe. But baseball is so relentless with the schedule. It's hard for me to really follow like April, like when the season starts. And
so for me, my kind of outer sport watching outside of hockey experiences throughout the hockey season. I watch Spurs, and there's who knows if I might have to be using Paramount Plus next year because of whatever league they might be at a different streaming platform because
they're okay. Arsenal took care of West Ham for you last week.
Exactly. So I pay attention to soccer. It's hard to watch. It's just admittedly hard to watch other sports with the nature of the schedule, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's I wish I paid more attention to I will watch. I do watch the NBA Finals every year. I enjoy the NBA Finals, but I truly come into the NBA Finals as someone who hasn't watched maybe beyond seeing a game on a TV at a bar all year, just because it's been. Yeah. But that works well because the schedule tends to be that schedule's preset. The NHL, the Stanley Cup Final tends to be kind of set around that a little bit. Baseball for me has always been the and I like baseball, and I'm unfortunately a Mets fan when it comes to how life works with all of that.
You like baseball, but baseball doesn't like you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, the same could be said about my choice in supporting of soccer teams as well, where I like the sport, but the sport doesn't love me back. You
won a little fake trophy last year. That's something.
Yeah. It is a European trophy, Robert. It is a European trophy.
Yeah. Okay. You say so. If you say so.
I kind of, so for baseball, for me, from a locale perspective, I kind of get the kind of residual Tigers coverage, just where I hear it on local sports talk radio. You kind of get where things are going and everything like that. But I went to the playoff game last year. I went to their playoff game last year. Actually wrote about it. Really enjoyed the experience and everything. Piece. But I don't really have a chance. I don't really sit down. It's kind of like that July 1st. It's for me the summer months, Robert, and we can talk a little bit more about this. And it's changed. It's evolved a little bit for me since I now do way more on the prospecting front, actually. Mm-hmm. But so it's like after July 1st, I kind of catch up a little bit, right? Where it becomes after July 1st, after we get through free agency, which is obviously a big work day for both of us. 4th of July, we typically go somewhere off grid, either usually somewhere Western or Northern Michigan. Christina and I and the kids usually go somewhere with either her parents or a friend, and we do that. And then it kind of becomes, and then Mets baseball, I don't actually watch a lot of baseball. The radio broadcast becomes a little bit more of my background soundtrack of the
baseball and radio is so great. Like
exactly.
if you have the right announcers, it's
exactly.
Fantastic.
So it becomes it becomes more and more of my background soundtrack of you're staying up late and the sun's up later and you got the game on in the background. And even if it is on like on the TV. It's more so passively watching. So that's kind of that's the reality of just how it works. I think working in sports, right? Like just like I can imagine. One of my mentors in this business was John Lowe. John Lowe covered the Tigers for 25 years in Detroit. John is actually the inventor of the father of the quality start stat. John's the one who invented the quality start stat and everything like that. And but John was a big hockey fan.
Just six innings, at least 6 innings pitched and 3 or fewer earned runs, as I recall.
Correct. Yes. And but John was a huge hockey fan, and the reason he was able to stay connected to a lot of hockey stuff was it worked well with the baseball off season, right? Where and him and I was a college student at Bowling Green. He would come down and watch college hockey games. We would go get Chinese food often before the games, and talk about. I'm 20 years old. It was such a great resource for me, and we would talk about kind of the field and the craft and everything. And then I'd go cover the game. And then it was always really cool. He would read my story in the BG News, which was the student paper at Bowling Green. And he would read it and then he'd email me about it the next day, which was always a really cool thing. And so,
I mean, it's mentorship, right? You had
exactly.
He was a mentor. It sounds like
exactly. Yeah. And so but he was someone who I saw kind of that baseball hockey crossover. So like baseball, it's always funny. Like I pick up what's happening with the Tigers because of locale. I pay attention to what happens with the Mets, but I don't really get anything else around the league. I'm just completely aloof to, right? Like when I've got a good friend who will be like, "Oh, did you see this guy sign for this much?" And I'm like, I don't know who that is. I like just not to be like, and I do, and I get, I think Jamie who covers the Rangers is a hell of a writer. I love Jamie's work, and obviously, so when I get a chance to, I try to keep up a little bit with what he writes. I don't really follow the Rangers as much, and I get to see a little bit because I do the work with our pal Bob Sturm on the back end, so I get to see when he writes it a little bit more. But it's more of when it has to pull me in. So, what about you?
Yeah,
I mean, is it similar for you?
It's similar. Yeah, the in-market thing, like the Mavericks. I watched some runs. Like I had a roommate back when I was in college in like 2007, I think, when they played Phoenix, and I think they got eliminated when they had a pretty good team. And then the 2011, obviously, championship run. I wasn't even in Texas at the time, but was following those just because I knew enough other Dallas people to where that those runs were just kind of in the air. But since moving back out here in 2019, very much everything, even like the Dallas Wings, like I could tell you a fair amount about the Dallas Wings season that just started and all the drama that's going on and all the, potential things. There's some crossover with arena situation with them and the NBA and the NHL teams in town too. Rangers, very much like you said, Jamie Newberg, fantastic. Helps me to feel like I know more about the Rangers than probably my time investment always allows me to actually make. I try to stay connected to the Dodgers too, since that's kind of been my childhood team. And beyond that, it really just, it's tough. I also, like you said, especially in kind of mid-July to mid-August, like to kind of check out a little bit from almost all sports, really, aside from, big news or something like that. Maybe that might be the time going on a walk in the evening, listening to a baseball game on the radio or something, just kind of very passively watching and listening and just kind of passively participating in sports for 3 or 4 weeks, which is kind of nice because as much as, like you say, you never really feel like you're totally working, quote unquote, in some ways, because we both love what we do. It is also really nice to take a step back from that sometimes too, and kind of lay sports down for a little bit. So I enjoy doing that in the summer for a month, but it's nice to have other things to pivot to and to participate in them more from a like fan perspective or just enjoyment perspective, even if you don't have a rooting interest, because sports are supposed to be able to be enjoyed, not just, worked and covered on.
It's also the summer also becomes a lot of I take a lot of that evening time back into I do way more, like I still read a lot during the season, but there's times where it's like, it's hard to do and because I love this sport so much and I get so fascinated. There's a lot of times where you're like, you go to sit down and I'm sitting down on the couch and it's 9:30 and you think like, oh, I'll read a book for about 30 minutes. But then you see, oh, hey, this game's on, and I might go flip over to this, right? And,
Yep.
And so like I catch up on, I intentionally do, I read a lot more in the summer, and then I also actually, aside from maybe like I saw a movie, and this is going to sound old manish, but it's part just the reality of having a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old now. Like, like Christina and I snuck out to see a movie on last week on Friday. She had off from work, and so we went to the 11 a.m. showing of like Project Hail Mary, right? And when
I just read the book. I haven't seen the movie, but I just read the book.
I read the book first. Actually, it was one of those.
Nice.
Things,
Good
like I read the book first, and then we went and saw the movie, and it was like it was nice to sneak out and see a movie, right? Like, and
Yes.
So it's like, it's always, I think it's kind of the sports thing, right? Where we live in this world, Robert, where even though it's, even if we're not covering that game that night, there's such a natural tendency of it's 7:30 on a Wednesday. I'm going to flip on this, right? It's not easy to be kind of connected to shows and movies and everything like that. So there's something kind of nice about it then. So
yeah, I think you're right. My reading, there's kind of times even in season where I can still be keeping up with reading, but like watching shows or anything like that, that really suffers during the season because A, I'm already watching screens all the time. So I try not to be doing that too much in my off time. And B, it's just the cadence of it. It's just hard to get invested unless it's something really easy to like kind of, you come back from a game and it's like midnight and you just need to wind down for half an hour or something. That can be nice. Yeah.
My good, bad project, and I say that intentionally, good, bad project right now is I've been wanting to, for a while, to actually watch all the Fast and Furious movies all the way through from once again, I said good, bad project. And
I can admire this in a certain way. Yeah.
And it's the, and so yesterday, so last night it was just me and my 5-year-old. And so, we watched
family. They're all about family.
Exactly. It's all about family. It's all about found family, and it's all about. And so we watched the last 30 minutes of the first one, and so I don't know if I'm a good or bad parent.
Hey, that was a fun movie. The first one was super
and
fun.
So and then we watched the first 30 minutes of Too Fast, Too Furious.
Oh, I saw that in theaters. You better believe I saw Too Fast, Too Furious in theaters. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I believe I got through whatever the last one Paul Walker was in after he died. I think it was maybe the 7th one, whether it was Fast 7 or whatever they were calling them. They've just reworked the title while also trying not to stray too much from the same. Just rework numbers and the words fast and furious in whatever way they can. But for me, that was kind of I saw it at the Dollar Theater at the time with some friends, the last one, Paul Walker. And I felt like, you know what, this is a natural like off ramp for me. I've put a lot of time into this franchise over the years. And I feel like this is about the peak of return on investment for me. So I was happy to say farewell. But I applaud you for making the commitment to go all the way.
I have intentionally not looked up, like I've seen all of them in some case or point, but it's always been like you would see one and I'm like, wait, what's happening here? Because I forget, so I'm intentionally going.
It could also be from like any of the movies.
I know,
like, the one where they get betrayed or the one where they meet a new British person that they think is evil is actually good or vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm intentionally going down this path of having not looked up at all what happens. Like no notes going in, because basically I guess, and I can report back on this show whenever I want to get
very much. You absolutely have to. Yeah.
I want to get through the moment of, there's two things, and then we will get to hockey talk. I promise people. There's two things there's two decisions one thing to be discovered and one decision to be made. The first one is I want to be able to draw the line of when they jump the shark, because that's obviously the first couple are still. Yeah, it's a street racing movie, right?
For sure. And then Tokyo Drift is almost like a spin-off, sort of, because it's like,
and that's and Tokyo Drift is the other part of this. That's the one where I think within the world of Fast and Furious, it's the one where I think the next 3 actually take place before that. Within the
timeline. The timeline, because is it Han, I think, who maybe dies or doesn't, and then you have to go back and forth and figure. Okay.
So,
I am very excited for this project.
Yes,
I did not expect to be talking about this today, but I'm very glad we did.
We will report back on this, and I see we already have a comment of other people who enjoy that we're at least talked about Too Fast, Too Furious. So,
this is more the algorithmically incorrect part of the show than the hockey part of the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. To spin us forward into Fast and Furiously get to hockey, because that's, I guess, why people want to hear both of us look at either of our faces. Oh, I see a comment here that it's after 6 where they jump the shark. So I guess that's maybe that's when Tokyo Drift is.
I think you'll have to be the judge of this, Sean. I don't think any external sources can really set this line. You have to be the one to draw the line.
Yes. Anyway, let's. Speaking of franchises and legacies and everything like that, what a perfect time to talk about.
But I think it's when The Rock comes in, pretty much, is my opinion. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, that's a whole nother debate of... did you ever watch the show? I'm sorry, we're going pop culture heavy right now. Did you ever watch Community?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's the... Yeah. Isn't there the class that he takes about is Nicolas Cage good or bad?
I just referenced this yesterday. I was talking to some people, and it completely transforms his mind into seeing everything as Nicolas Cage. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And so to your Rock point is, does the Rock make something good, or is it the side that it's gone too far? There was a restaurant in Austin when I lived there that had pretzel buns, and they were like really good sandwiches and everything like that. And Christina liked those. Christina liked those sandwiches.
A pretzel bun cheeseburger is one of the best.
Oh my god! Yes.
And
we went to I went to go pick up a sandwich for Christina, and I knew they wanted a pretzel bun, and the person at the counter told me, "Well, we no longer do pretzel buns because Wendy's does pretzel buns." And so my comparison here is The Rock the pretzel bun ruiner of movies?
Oh no, we can't do Fast and Furious because The Rock's doing Fast and Furious.
You've gone too mainstream at that point.
That needs to be like show vernacular now. Oh man, they really pretzel bunned that.
Yes, they really pretzel bunned this.
The Mike Leg goal has been pretzel bunned by Trevor Zegras, you could say,
or the legger, as Marty Turco calls it. I give Marty. I like to respect what Marty as the person who.
I said Mike Leg. I feel like I was 90%.
No. I'm intentionally not saying the other name that everyone uses because I'm
good.
This is backing you up here.
Okay.
Marty was the goalie who was at Michigan who almost got hit in the face 15 times a day at practice because of it. I think he deserves to name it.
Yes. Okay. I'm on board with that.
We are on board with this. The legger.
Great.
Okay. Legacy, franchise, everything like that. What better time to talk about Jamie Benn? Right?
Nice. You wrote a piece about Jamie Benn, as I recall, fairly recently, actually.
I wrote a piece about Jamie Benn over in D Magazine this week. And big credit to editor you and I both work with, and Mike Bellucci, and working on that. You and I actually chatted off air the other day about how there's certain topics where it's nice to have, you and I love this independent media space, and you get a bit of the unfiltered you and I in this, and within our respective Substack platforms, or some of you are watching right now. There is something nice about when you have that nuanced conversation and driving point to have a good editor, and so quick shout out to Mike on that. But
very much so.
Obviously, Robert, you were there, End of the Stars season stuff with Glenn Gulletson and Jim Nill and Jamie and everything, and I obviously spoke my piece, and I wrote about how, in my view, the Stars and the Jamie Benn decision, I think they're botching this personally, and I have no issue attaching my name to that. Where I think they need to be a little bit smarter about when it's time to move on and everything. Just like Robert was ready to move on from Fast and Furious movies when it was time. There was a natural ending. What's your what's your thinking in this world and space right now, Robert? I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it was I think you framed the piece really, really well. Anyone who hasn't read it and who's maybe only seen headline or something, actually go and read it, because I think you did a good job of kind of outlining why you got to this point, and the fact that Jamie Benn is very much still like a productive NHL player in a certain role. He's just in this awkward spot of, as you wrote in the piece, of meaning so much more to a franchise than the type of role that he would best be inhabiting at this point in his career. And that kind of has shown up the most in the playoffs the last 2 years. Like last spring, he played, what did they have? 16 games, I think. And he had 1 goal and 2 assists in 18 games. And then this year they played 6 games against Minnesota. He had, I think, 4 or 5 penalties and got fined and no points, which on the one hand, Jamie Benn doesn't need to be a point per game player. He's not a point per game player at this point in his career, but you'd like to see him chip in 1 or 2, right? Last year against Colorado, that 1 goal he scored, people will remember that was in, I believe it was game 3 when Tyler Seguin had the game-winning overtime goal, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe it was game 2. It was in one of those overtime victories against Colorado in the first round.
I think it was 2, but
it might have been 2. Yeah, it was a big goal. I think it was in the third period even. It was a big game-tying goal. And it was his only goal of the playoffs, but like it was a big goal, and he had a couple other moments too. And in this one, it sounds weird to say, it's almost dirty, but like Ryan Suter was doing things that he probably should have been fined for when the Stars played the Wild 3 years ago, like cross-checking the heck out of Kirill Kaprizov and definitely injuring him for the series, right? Which is kind of dirty. Jamie Benn was maybe trying to do something similar. I actually kind of believe that's kind of what you do when you're not able to contribute in other ways. You try to affect the game. You want to impact the game in some way, especially someone who's used to being able to do that as much as Jamie Benn has done in his career for a long time. Great career also. But for the Stars, it's a very tricky spot. What I wrote, and I think it dovetails a lot with what you did, what I wrote a week or 2 ago, just in kind of a more broad overview of the Stars' end of season in general, was Jamie Benn deserves for this to go better. He deserves not to be in the position that he was put in at the end of the playoffs this year. Whatever that looks like, I think it's possible that could look a couple of different ways. But the fact of the matter is this season ended with Jamie Benn very much kind of having a spotlight put on him and not being able to rise to the occasion anymore, because that's just not the player he is. And that's not really fair to him, because if anything, it just puts what the player he isn't anymore in starker relief, when he still is a player who can do good things in the NHL. But when he's asked to, I go back to the fact that he actually had 2 shifts. Like there was a whistle during when they brought him out as the 6th skater, when they pulled their goalie in that game 6. Ben was out there for 1 shift and actually made a couple of good plays in the offensive zone to keep the puck in and create some looks. Then there was a whistle. I think the puck was covered and went out of play. Ben went out there again, and Golitzson sent him out there again. And that to me was the bridge too far. Like, hey, you know what? He went out there and actually was decent, but he's the oldest forward on the team. Like, maybe don't expect him to be able to empty the tank again. I think they might have called a timeout or something, but regardless, now is the time to put Maverick Bourque or someone else out there and ask them to step up. But with Jamie Benn in that room and on that team, it's really, really hard for anyone to make that choice. And who knows why Golitzson made that choice, right? He hasn't commented on it yet, but it's a tough position for Ben, and frankly, he deserves better. He deserves better, whether that's to be told, you know what, the organization's going to take the hit in the bad press by making the tough choice to say, we can't do this again, or by really, really clearly defining your role in such a way that this doesn't happen again. But either way, it's not fair to him, because the playoffs ended and everyone was talking about how Jamie Benn, and that just really shouldn't have been the case, because the series wasn't really won or lost because of Jamie Benn.
It wasn't. And it's that's one of my bigger points. And I obviously I try to be selective when I wade in or out of the social media response, because a lot of people who want to, I truly believe anyone who went and read the piece is going to understand where I'm coming from, even if they disagree, but at least there's a respectful nature to it. It's the level of, it's not, and this is nothing that Jamie's asked for, right? Like, I think a lot of people being like, oh, Jamie will do anything to win. And I truly believe Jamie would do anything to win. But there's, at the same time, I also don't think Jamie has the personality or the want to be the one to go and say, hey, Jim and Glenn, take away the C. Or hey, Jim and Glenn, it's like because they're
especially when that's one of the only big roles he has left, right? Exactly. As a player who used to have all these big roles, now that's one of the only ways in which he's kind of a significant figure. Because, so that'd be really hard to let go of. I'm sure, that would be hard for me in that position.
There's a way, I was thinking about this, and Mike and I were talking about this on background when I was working on the piece and everything. We're talking about there's ways you could have done this, and if you want it's always awkward when we take away the captaincy or whatever. But there is a way they could have done this, right? Like because where you take away, you open up the space and you create that gap, right? Like when I look at the Stars, I think about how much they let John Klingberg walk. Not necessarily, and obviously part of it was the money, what John Klingberg was looking for, but
yeah, Peter Wallen kind of let John Klingberg walk as much as anyone.
But part of the letting John Klingberg walk was creating a vacuum for Miro to step in offensively, and that was a big piece of it. There was addition by subtraction in that, and obviously, if Jamie's still on this team, he's still going to have some error, but there was something where when Jim doubles down and says he will be our captain, he will be this, he will be that, you kind of back yourself further and further into that corner, and you just kind of continue to tear Jamie's eventual legacy down, right? Like that's the thing that hurts the most, right?
He deserves better than that.
He deserves better than that. And so you could have stuck the landing where you could have had hey, you didn't have to answer he will be the captain. You could have said, hey, we're going to let Jamie take some weeks to see whether he wants to come back or not, and then we'll see what happens and everything like that. Then when you did re-sign him, you could have had your press conference. You could have had a little presser to re-sign him. You could have had just say you've decided Wyatt Johnston's the next guy. You could have had at the presser, you could have been Wyatt Johnston is surprisingly there, and you can be like, hey, Jamie literally passes it over like, hey, I'm here to help Wyatt take the next step. And then all of a sudden, he can still be that voice. He can still be a leader, but it's no longer, well, this is an unscratchable player on the fourth line. It's no longer someone who has to be the centerpiece of the future of where this team goes. So I will say, Robert, one of the things that I was most happy about after writing this and having this conversation is I've enjoyed hearing dissenting opinions on this, honestly. Like I've enjoyed the respectful kind of nature of it. There's people who disagree with me and I'm cool with that. You might disagree with me. Anyone listening might disagree with me. And I'm good with that because I hope with this show, and I guess I should have labeled this as producer notes, but like I hope within this show, and I hope there's some things that we'll talk a little bit more about later in this show, is I like the idea. I think we need to get further and further back to respectful disagreement on things because
I don't think so.
Exactly. Right. We need to get further and further back to the place where you can have two alternating views and I don't have to win you over to my side, but I at least have to respect yours. And I think that's a big thing for me. So
yeah, not every debate is a business deal that where like one person's the winner, one person's the loser. Like the goal should be good dialogue that gets everyone to a better place and clear point. Even if one person ultimately does end up making clear point, like that's the whole idea is that you have genuine good faith debate. And I think the part where I probably depart from you on this is saying that the only best course at this point is for them to part ways and for the team or Ben to make the choice. I think, but I'll just admit that to me, I kind of sympathize with the fact that there's a little bit of a romantic appeal to doing the thing where you finally have a captain, right? Madonna didn't quite end his career in Dallas. We all know how that went, and that's probably still casting a shadow over all of this, right? Brendan Morrow, they would have loved for him to stay there, but his body was breaking down, deteriorating even more than Jamie Benn's. And so it was time and new ownership and everything made it even easier, I think, to make that transition when they did in 2013, when they traded Morrow, right, during the season and traded him. And then they gave Ben the next season. I think it's at the point where the Stars would love the romance of being able to. It would be easiest for everyone, right? It would be if Jamie says, "You know what? I think I'm good. I've done it." And who knows? Maybe that's exactly where maybe we don't know yet. He was less committal to me in this end of year than he was last year. Last year, he was pretty clear about, I want to play, and if I'm going to play, it'll be with the Dallas Stars. This year, he still said, I think I want to play, but it was a slightly less adamant. So I do think that there's still a possibility that something changes, but there's some romantic appeal, right, to him being able to have one last year. Tyler Seguin has one last year in his deal. And also, let's not gloss over the fact that the Stars don't exactly have a ton of left wings sitting there anyway. I don't think Ben's the only player who can fill that role. Obviously, I'm sure they could find some other players or try to, but what if they do this? What if they actually made that really hard decision and cut ties? And it wasn't great, but they did it. And then they spent all season trying a rotating cast of wingers and never found someone who could be a 35 per 60 point player like Ben was this last year, right? Then everyone would be saying, why didn't you bring him back? You both soured his relationship a tiny bit at the end, and you never replaced his production.
I worry about his shooting percentage going back to normal next season.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
And I think that's my worry about it. It's obviously the points, everyone looks at the points and they're like, oh, 15 goals as on the fourth line. That's great. But he had a 20% shooting percentage last year. It's 6.6% higher than any number in his career. Mm-hmm. And I know he's shooting less and everything. And so I personally worry about a correction to the norm of that. Yeah. And all of a sudden he becomes an 8 or 9 goal player. And then the romanticism starts to break down even further. And that scares me from, like, I don't want, I have a unique relationship with Jamie where you've been there. Yeah, it's where he and I have a mutual respect for each other. I believe we might not, he might not like me as to a super extent, but we have a mutual respect for each other. When I wrote my first book, I was struggling to track down Mike Modano because Mike's very difficult with his phone. He can be very flaky. But Jamie had agreed to write the foreword for my book, my first book, and he was all on board for that if we didn't get Mike on board, obviously. And that's, so I have a interesting relationship with him, and it's a bit sad at the same time that we have to be in this spot in my mind that we're looking at 14 should be retired on October 5th. If he's done this season, if he makes the decision over the next 2 weeks, he's done. They should just retire the number on October 5th or whatever and celebrate it. So
I'd be okay with that. Yeah. Like, he's a career player. What are you waiting for, right?
Exactly.
I know in the past they've wanted to wait till players like make the Hall of Fame, or if not, wait for a while, like with Yuri Lettinen. But Ben, there's no, at this point, his legacy with the franchise is already very, very clear. Until Jason Robertson, he was like the only first team All-Star, I think, the franchise has ever had. So in my mind, that's a pretty easy decision. Did you ever, I don't know if this was something you could ever tell, but you wrote a pretty famous piece after Jim Lights had a conversation with you in I think it was December 2018, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, correct.
And what was the reaction, if it was something on the record? What was your next interaction with Jamie Benn like after writing that piece? Because that was about as inflammatory a piece as you can get. And I to whatever extent you can share, I think it would be interesting for people to understand how your relationship with Jamie did or didn't change after that.
Correct. So
because there are a lot of players for whom their relationship with a writer would change very much after a piece like that.
So I want to be two things that I think need to be established on that. So I have my conversation with Jim Lights. And then the Stars practiced that day. And then the Stars practiced. And in that famous story where Jim Lights went and called the Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn's play fucking horseshit, as for those who forgot, after practice, I asked Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn about their play. I didn't tell them I didn't give them exactly what Jim Lights had said, but I told them that. And then that story he published later. And I remember going to the locker room the next day. It was a morning skate day at American Airlines Center. Huge media horde, much larger media horde than
the vultures were out.
They were out, and obviously everyone's coming out. And I will remember two parts of it. Jamie's first reaction as we walk into the locker room. There's a lot of players who are kind of like enjoying like the watching this and enjoying and laughing at the circus of it all. And Jamie actually said, "Sean, you're a legend." Like, that's what he said to me the first time, like in a very dry, sarcastic way. And him and I, and then same thing with Tyler Seguin and I, we both spoke separately. I pulled both of them aside. Credit to Tyler. Tyler came over to me first, actually, and was very, and I don't know if that part of that was the history in Boston or anything like that, but both of those individuals spoke to me human to human afterwards, understanding that I was doing my job.
You were telling a story, but it's not like you came out with this opinion as a hit piece.
Exactly. And it was kind of that. And that's an important note for me, right? Like when Jamie's career is over, I'm going to write something really lovely. I'm going to be honest about it, right? Like I don't know what it is exactly, but if it's something that I got to write 3 weeks from now or 12 months from now or whatever, there's something about that legacy that's really important.
Teams don't get players like him and everything they mean that stick with a franchise as long as he has.
Yeah.
They just don't come around that often.
No, and he's a complicated person, right? Like he's not your cookie cutter athlete in many ways because of the way of how poorly he handled some things and everything like that. But it's definitely something that I hope the organization does right by him when he does retire, because I feel like they've put him in a rough spot. We got about 18 minutes or so before we get on to into our guest, and we're going to talk about some interesting stuff there. But before we do that, I want to go. I wanted to kind of talk to you, Robert, and I'm going to jump. We could talk about some coaching stuff, and there's some interesting things going on. Maybe not. Chuck Knobloch maybe does or doesn't have a job in Edmonton, and maybe
Chris Knobloch. You said Chuck Knobloch. The baseball is coming out.
Baseball. Yeah. Chris Knobloch.
He was a player too. Yeah, yes. Chuck Knobloch. Oh my gosh, great player. Yes. We could talk about coaching, but it sounds like you're going to go somewhere else.
I want to talk about award stuff. I want to kind of go down that path. I want to kind of pull back I think this show is the perfect one to kind of pull back that. Kind of explain a little bit how that works, because obviously, as we're recording this earlier today, Matthew Schaefer was announced as the unanimous Calder Trophy winner. All 198 first place votes. Islanders rookie, highly deserving of that. I did not have a vote this year. I have been a PHWA voter in the past. It's been a couple years since I voted, and but you voted this year, and as someone who has more recently filled out a full ballot, everyone votes for the Masterton if you're in the Professional Hockey Writers Association. Yes. I wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to just kind of open us up about what goes into your thought process, not about each award first, but just about filling out the ballot and kind of the weight of it and everything, because it's really easy for people to hop on social media and be mad about, hey, my guy did or didn't get a vote. Obviously, there's been a lot about that right now with some heart conversation with Celebrini not being a finalist.
Whoever wins it, people are going to be mad.
Oh, and
same for Norris too, honestly.
Yeah. And I feel horrible for my pal Shang Peng in San Jose. Shang does a great job covering the Sharks. Shang revealed that he had Celebrini second on his ballot, and you see all of these Sharks fans piling on Shang for voting for their guy second in the league MVP vote, right? So I'm going to give you the floor right now here.
Yeah. My experience this year was, one, just how daunting a task it is. And there's a temptation when you're doing it, because they announce the finalists, but you vote for 5. For most of these awards, you vote for your top 5. So then they reduce those down to the players who got the 3 highest vote totals as the finalists, even though it's already been decided. They just want to kind of tease it, right? These are the 3 finalists are really the players who finished in the top 3 in voting, and then they'll reveal which one of those 3 finished first when they actually announce the award, like they did with the Calder Trophy today. So for me, just getting down to like who I think those top 5 probably are was a lot tougher than I had expected, because there are some players where I kind of had a preconception going in. The Norris this year, I think, was probably as tough as it's ever going to be. And I had a few players like top of mind, like, oh yeah, but then you start doing a sanity check, right? Like looking, okay, were they just hot for a little bit, or what type of usage were they getting, right? Were they mostly deployed against, second, third lines, or heavy offensive zone usage? How much of their scoring came on the power play? Same for Hart Trophy too. Like, how were they used? When did their production come? How many of their goals were empty net goals? Like, empty net goals are so good, they don't count against you, but an empty net goal
somebody
is
has
less.
To somebody
has to score it. And it's good. Usually when an empty net goal is scored, especially if it's the first empty net goal, that clinches the game, right? So in some ways, it's almost like a save in baseball or something. It's like, hey, you didn't do all the stuff that came before, maybe, but this is important. But to me, for instance, a player who this didn't even apply that much this year. I think McKinnon had a bunch of empty net goals, but Wayne Gretzky had a bunch of empty net goals too. That's okay. so you just trying to break out whatever the award is, the category that's tougher for some, like Selkie and Lady Bing. To me, it was just kind of revealed to me as I was going through them how much I don't know that we should really be voting on the Lady Bing Award at all. In fact, I kind of believe that we shouldn't be, because it's called like the most gentlemanly player. And already I'm like, I haven't interacted with all of the players around the league enough to know who's gentlemanly. So then you have to use stats, some sort of proxy stat, right?
Yeah.
And most people use penalty minutes, and say, okay, a Lady Bing should be someone who plays a fair amount, but doesn't take penalties and isn't, maybe you can't have a fight on your card. I remember one year Tyler Seguin was, maybe people were talking about Tyler Seguin as a Lady Bing candidate, and then he had a fight randomly, and they're like, well, I guess that throws him out of the Lady Bing.
Patrick Nemeth.
Yes, Patrick Nemeth, his former teammate.
Yes.
And ultimately what I came down to is there should be a little bit of subjectivity. That's the whole point of the awards voting. It's not to be able to say this one number makes this player definitively number 4, definitively number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers should all have an impact, just as how they did those things. Like some players genuinely, Nathan McKinnon, right? The way he does some things, you've written about it too. It's Mario Lemieux-esque. It is genuinely supernatural. It looks like, at least when he does it. And that wow factor should have impact to me. Like that, same thing with Matthew Schaefer, the way he did some of the things he did this year, that how young he was, all of these things being those should all be factors. So for me, you try to compile both the objective factors and the numbers, make sure I'm looking at not just the raw and boxcar numbers, but also looking at metrics and situational play, then trying to even boil it down further from that and look at their play relative to other players on their team. How much of this was a product of the system? And you don't want to punish a player for playing on a good team. A lot of people are talking about how Scott Wedgwood was probably not getting as many Vezina votes as he probably should have, because they're like, well, you play in Colorado. And Nathan McKinnon didn't get a Ted Lindsay finalist nomination from players this year because they figured, well, you play on Colorado. And Cale Makar, if he doesn't win the North, people say, well, yeah, that's because you play in Colorado. Like eventually, maybe they should all be winning awards because they're all on the best team. But it's a tricky thing. Ultimately, I had to kind of get maybe 80 to 90% of the way there with what I felt pretty confidently I could prove if I were like writing a paper or like arguing in debate class or something. Then the last 10% to me was a little bit more like romance of, okay, what's the like compelling reason to put this player where I have them? Or what's the part of their game that makes them special and makes them deserving of, like, when you're trying to convert a hockey fan, how would you use this player to do it? Again, not that that's an actual math equation with like that 90 and 10%, but that's kind of the mix that I approached the voting with this year.
Yeah, it's I think it should be difficult to vote. I think if you're taking the time to put in the effort and do that, I think you're doing right by it. Like, I always hate because some ballots should be ripped, and it's not but the problem is we don't rip the proper ballots, right? Like oftentimes it'll be like, oh my God, you put that person up high for this award, who like you went against the grain on that. I actually don't mind the person who goes against the grain. If you can go and defend it and show me this is why, we should have more things like that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that is the problem is we don't get the truth serum of who just went to the NHL media site and just sorted by points.
Points, yeah.
And who did this. Like, I think the other thing that is just kind of hard to discern is the reality of so many writers don't watch, like so many local writers, I don't think watch enough of the NHL. Like, we started this show talking about how difficult it is to pay attention to other sports. And I don't know, maybe this is why I'm not getting votes. Maybe this is why I don't get a vote, is because I have been open about this opinion. Not enough people in the PHWA go and actually cover the other team. They care about their team. And part of that's their editor and their boss, right? But like, sure, the amount of times that I'm where I will not see, I'll read a story or I'll see reporting in person, and it's basically writing about one team versus the other, and the only way a player on the other team ever gets mentioned is if they scored a goal or they're the goalie, right? Like, and that's the reality. And so if that's how you're approaching your day-to-day, right? Like, if that's how you're approaching the day-to-day of your job, and you cover whatever team you cover, how do I really expect that you're going to have put the time and effort to really
Right.
understand what to say. Like, all right, let's use like a Jacob Slavin, right? Like, widely reputation wise has now been built up as, hey, one of the
defensive defenseman, et cetera.
Yeah, one of the best sticks in the league, everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's someone who, unless he scored a goal in the game you covered, did you really think about him?
Yeah, how many of you are putting him in your 3 stars for that game? Yeah,
exactly. And so I think that's the other kind of problem with this, and it's and the other thing that I kind of get not laughed at, but I kind of is we get into the debate of what is the definition of the award, when for better or worse, there is a definition of the award. And I don't think people realize that sometimes. So you brought up the Lady Bing, and it was Jason Spezza who once told me his belief was the Lady Bing should be used as an award to basically recognize a guy who's a good dude, but is never going to get any other award. That was like Jason Spezza's definition of how the Lady Bing should be used. That is not the definition of the award. The definition is gentlemanly conduct combined with a high level of play, right? That's what the definition of that award is. But how do you go and vote on that, right? Like, how do you properly? And that's a different definition for everyone. It's kind of an interesting thing. I want to answer a quick reader. I was gonna hit that. Go ahead. Yeah. So, just there was a question about 2023. Someone saw that Wayne Gretzky voted that year, and so there is every year the PHWA. I believe it's the president who makes who gets invited, but basically they have the power to give a couple ballots to other media members that aren't members of the PHWA. There was some debate about this a couple years, maybe a year or two ago, when Ryan Whitney from the Spit Chicklets podcast got a ballot. And I know there was some pushback one way and the other on that, which I don't really want to go down right now. But there is, I honestly don't mind Wayne Gretzky having the vote.
You could argue he's on the TNT panel or whatever, so he's a broadcaster in some sense. Sure. So also, he probably knows a little bit about hockey. But.
Exactly, probably. His TNT work though is not nearly as, let's say, and it's not nearly as good as it was when they had Rick Tocchet on.
Agreed.
Like he was the key that unlocked Gretzky's personality on the broadcast, right? Like I think Rick Tocchet, who's now obviously coach of Philadelphia, but once Rick Tocchet went back behind the bench, I think Gretzky's effectiveness on the panel kind of took a bit of a hit. But
I think people defer to him too much. You need someone like Tocchet there who's not necessarily going to be overly deferential to Gretzky, which is hard not to do given that he's Wayne Gretzky. But
when it comes to the awards, one of the things, and not don't give your ballot away because obviously we only have the finalists out, but what was your thought process when you look at the definition of the Hart Trophy? Because I think that's one of the hot button topics we always see, where I see, and even Bob McKenzie once went and wrote the, you know what, I'm going to go and just vote for the best player in the league. And then there's a lot of people who go and, so when it comes to the Hart, and I've got an opinion on this, but I want to hear yours to start. How do you kind of look at that and start to break it down?
The one thing that's always rankled for me is the idea that you have to make the playoffs to be a Hart Trophy winner, that your team has to make a play. To me, it goes back to a kind of a long-held, you could call it a bias. It's just a philosophy I've had for a long, long time about, even going back to baseball for a minute, about pitchers and how pitcher wins and losses, kind of with goalies, right? Goalie wins and losses sometimes as the GMs vote on the Vezina Trophy. We'll find out how much they love wins and losses over things the goalie actually has in their control, right? Last time I checked, goalies usually don't score too many game-winning goals. So actually saying goalies have control over wins and losses ultimately is kind of silly to me. I get it. There's a narrative there about, goalie plays well enough for their team to win. You do that. There's some correlation, whatever. To me, same thing with pitcher wins and losses. Ultimately, I care less about the wins and losses than I do about what the player actually did have under their control. And so I firmly believe that for the Hart Trophy, the value, however you want to define value to their team, that should be independent of the team's place in the standings, right? It's not Connor McDavid's fault that the Oilers missed the playoffs for a couple of years, right? It's not Macklin Celebrini's fault that the Sharks didn't actually have like an NHL blue line this year, right? That's not something that he should be punished for. I think the award should be telling the story of that season on some level, just like the Hall of Fame, and that's a whole other thing we can talk about at a different time. But ultimately, an award and your ballot should be telling an accurate story of that season on some level. And I think that story is incomplete if you only tell the story of players on teams that made the playoffs for those big trophies.
Yeah, for me, I don't like the, hey, we should just give it to the best player. A lot of times, I want to be clear, a lot of times the best player is the MVP. A lot of times those two are the same, but it's not always exactly the same, right? In my view. And there's two parts of this. One, there's writer ego, because writers forget the Pearson exists, and the Pearson is voted on by the players, and that one is literally written out as most outstanding.
Wait, the Ted Lindsay or the Pearson?
Sorry, Ted Lindsay. Sorry, Ted Lindsay. The Ted Lindsay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
You're wrong word. But put that in the producer notes for next week.
The Pearson is something. There's some Pearson.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What is the Pearson again? Anywho, but the Ted Lindsay exists for the most outstanding player. So that award,
it used to be the Lester Pearson Award. That's what it was. You're just too old school. Yeah, it used to be the Lester Pearson. Then they renamed it to Ted Lindsay. Yes, nice poll. Okay.
Yes, deep cuts here.
You should write a book about hockey sometime.
The Ted Lindsay, there is an award for the best player in the league. The writers don't get to vote on it. Just like the writers don't get to vote on the best goalie in the league. We don't get that vote. And I think that's there's a writer ego that I think needs to be put in check on that. And I always looked at it where I didn't get a ballot, so I didn't go through 1 through 5 the way anyone who actually did it, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't go through it, but my first glance thought I would probably be one of the people that probably did have Celebrini won, because I go through a lot of I have a lot of that mindset of value to me. How do you make it work? If you're to take away one player from one team, which team gets most incrementally worse? Yeah. If you took away that player for a quote unquote replacement level player, obviously
Connor McDavid to me is an example of someone too who is in that category in a certain way. And when I was looking at him as a potential person to vote for, again, not revealing anything, on some level that factored into me too, because when you look at what he had to do on that Oilers team this year to get them even to the playoffs and to do as well as he did and as well as the team did, was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I do think they would do themselves a lot of favors if the awards were given out before anyone was eliminated from the playoffs. Because but
then you're excluding like a quarter of the season.
No. Like I think so. So the season
ends like after 70 games or something like that.
No. Like the votes have to be in, right? Like this game 82 happens. Next year it'll be game 84. You have to have your vote in before game 1 of the playoffs. Right. Like I would personally love a world where, hey, let's get all the awards out after 2 games of the playoffs, so we don't get these playoff narratives that drive things up or down. Anywho, speaking of playoff narratives and things that wonderfully connect and everything like that, and I'm very excited. Our guest for today has just joined the back studio. Robert will take over as the producer to get him on, but really excited to bring on Kyle Stitch from AFP Analytics. I'll have Kyle explain a little bit more for us for what he does, but basically Kyle is one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to understanding player value, cap hits, everything like that. And he helps run one of those tools that many people use on Twitter that they may or may not know actually how to use. So Kyle, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. So so my main job is I do a lot of tax work for professional athletes. And then kind of my side gig is around this time of the year running contract projections, trying to figure out where the market value that for all the pending free agents. And we've also started doing all the extension eligible players, where they're kind of slotted to potentially sign based off of past comparable contracts. And I guess that's basically, I live in the business space of hockey.
So the tax stuff is interesting. You helped me explain one of the most fascinating things in a piece about a year or two ago with the Chris Tanev situation, where I loved that you and I loved that I called you about it, and you're like, I've always wanted someone to say something publicly about this so I can talk about it. So I've always enjoyed going down that tax line, and that's a fascinating element. But today, Robert and I we might go down that path, who knows? But today, obviously, contract stuff is fresh in a lot of minds, and Robert and I have a lot of Dallas following, but also a lot of league-wide following, and can't help but obviously, not to bury the lead, but obviously everyone wonders, what is Jason Robertson worth? And that's a great way to open this conversation.
Especially in a year where the free agent
Yes.
class looks slightly
Yes.
better than what's on the shelves at my grocery store right now.
Yeah, and every day it just gets thinner and thinner. That
Charlie Coyle getting what 6-year deal or whatever it was.
Yeah, like Charlie Coyle. I'll get to Robertson in a second. Like Charlie Coyle, we had mid-season, so we're just finalizing our off-season ones probably within the next week. But mid-season, we ran them in January, February-ish. So really a good chunk of the season based on how the schedule was. Charlie Coyle, we were thinking around 5.8. I had him trending upwards in the offseason after I had got through him. 3 years though, 6 years just is like, okay, good for him.
I mean,
Very good for him. Glad for him, his family, his agent. I don't know if Columbus is going to love that, but at the same point, one of the things I'm sure we'll get to is how the rising cap environment probably is going to make that look not quite as bad in the future. So those extra 3 years might not be a problem. But Jason Robertson, yeah, he is in a situation where he has a lot of leverage right now. He is going to be a restricted free agent with arbitration rights this offseason. But he is also only 1 year from unrestricted free agency. So if Dallas doesn't want to pony up this offseason, he can say, fine, we'll go to arbitration. I'm going to ask for a 1-year contract, and I'm going to go test the open market next offseason. So because of that, we're projecting mid-season, and we have gone through him in the offseason here. Basically, Mikko Rantanen's contract is where his market value is. I don't think that should really come as much of a surprise, given they're both very similar contributors. And even though he's a restricted free agent, he almost has to be treated with that unrestricted tag. There could be a choice of them going short term, but if that happens, I think that's probably the end of their time after the upcoming season.
Even different player, but same deal. Mitch Marner, I think, has that exact same contract too, in another no tax state as well. So I think that market value makes a lot of sense to me, just looking even in a different environment too, where that's pretty much the going rate for an all-star winger who can score, point per game over a point per game.
Yeah, and even Kyle Connor's in that same ballpark. I know tax situation's a little bit different, but same ballpark right there for the top of the line scoring wingers. Absolutely.
How much does the Kyle, when you guys are looking at the numbers, and just to kind of pull it back, and we'll talk a little bit more about getting to that, the Robertson number, when you guys are going under the hood and figuring this stuff out, player comps, performance, what kind of goes into your formula as you guys kind of help us kind of explain to the listener of what goes into building out these projections?
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-pronged process. So we have our kind of app algorithm set up where we have a bunch of stats that get put in. We have the computer group players together based off of the stats that we've inputted. Balance. We have box score statistics. We have advanced metrics. We have penalty kill, whatever, power play. So it's trying to all encompass every single skill that a player is going to bring to the table. Basically, we get a list spit out. We put an age parameter and then kind of try and put some level of cap hit parameter, and we get a list of, okay, these are the players similar that were in that kind of range. And then from that, we go and manually look at every single output and usually it's just taking players out, but every so often it's like, okay, this contract signed, does it, even if the player isn't comparable, is it going to factor into the negotiation? So like, would Mikko Rantanen's contract, because he's in the exact same city, exact same situation, exact same team, how much is that going to impact? And we might occasionally bring that in as well. But ultimately, we're looking to get kind of like a market basket where we have some players that are I think most people would agree better performance wise, some players that are a little bit weaker performance wise, and then right in the middle, and we kind of average that out to come to a length. And then we base everything on cap hit percentage, so we kind of get to that number and then multiply that out by the current salary cap to get to what the projected annual average value or the cap hit, which is what fans care about, is.
Yeah.
How much does age, like obviously age is a factor, but also the age, but in a player's leverage, how much do those cancel each other out sometimes? Because yes, Robertson is a year or two younger than I think Marner and Rantanen were when they got their deals, but also when the market is thinner and with the cap going up, like you mentioned, it's not like the UFA pool is likely to be deeper at any time going forward. Is age maybe not as much a factor as perhaps it used to be when it comes to player leverage?
I think it's gonna, I don't know if I have a great answer, because I think we're kind of seeing a new environment. I think I started doing these projections 2018, I think. And I think for the first, 6 years, I worked under a cap that went up $5-6 million. So you kind of knew year to year things were fairly stable. So you kind of knew, okay, this is a player with arbitration, a player who doesn't have arbitration eligibility, a player who doesn't even have arbitration rights and is a 10.2 C, can't negotiate with basically anyone. Those you kind of get a sense of where those players slot. And now that, and then the unrestricted free agents, the market's going to dictate, and sometimes it all it takes is one team to kind of be like, oh, we're good with that. I think that the big trend, though, is term seems to matter to both teams and players, regardless of age. I mean, we started with Charlie Coyle, but you look at all most of the young players are still signing 7-8 year contracts, maybe 6, but you're not seeing them try to hit free agency in their prime. So I don't know if I have a great answer for where the age matters, because a lot are kind of locking up real early for their prime. So we don't necessarily have a sample size of top end players getting into the open market at a younger age.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say, or the other thing I wanted to add, I guess the second part of that question would be a clearer way of saying it. Is that projection, what you guys have come up with, what your algorithm has come up with for about 12 by 8, it sounds like for Robertson, is that projection for market value across the board, or does that like assume a 12 million in Dallas is equivalent to a 17 million in Minnesota, or something in New York or Winnipeg? How much is that assuming he resigns with Dallas? That's your projection. And how much is, because would Dallas, for instance, come up with similar numbers and then say, this is your market value, but then since you're playing here in Dallas, we would expect you to come down a little bit and take a discount or something like that?
So we do kind of look at it at that as kind of the market value being the middle of the road kind of situation. And then over the years, we have kind of added some context to our projections. We're like, okay, the projection we come up with is the middle, and then we'll show the discount for a situation, for a tax situation. Then we'll also show kind of a going to like a California team, for example, where there's a high tax, and we'll kind of break those out. But when you're talking restricted free agents where offer sheets almost never exist and the expectation is they stay where they currently are, we do kind of, so our approach where we kind of can look at the list before finalizing something, we do try to factor that in a little bit. Like I think a couple years ago, Jonathan Marchessault was up, and we kind of factored in him staying in a no income tax state. Jordan Eberle had re-signed with like Seattle recently, and it's like that comparison has to be in there because market situation matters here.
How did a couple things I'm going to get to a little bit more on Robertson, but I'm curious of Kaprizov's deal and McDavid's deal. Two deals that are not what expected, right? Do you just, when it comes to comps and everything like that, is it something where, okay, we just throw those away? Like, what's the proper way to look at those two when it comes to kind of figuring out proper market and things in your mind?
Yeah, McDavid's is probably one that we're not going to leave in as a comp, like, to be completely honest, because it's not in line with where we expected. Another one that kind of falls in the same category for just not necessarily in line with where we expected. Sam Reinhart a couple years ago. Yes, there was the Florida factor, but man, if he had hit the open market, he's getting 2-3 more million plus per year. Kaprizov's a little bit more interesting in that at some point, players are going to have to start pushing that boundary, whether it's forwards or even some of the defensemen that are coming up next offseason, Cal McCarr, Quinn Hughes. Someone's going to have to start bringing that comp into negotiations. But McDavid going at the average annual value, I will be curious if some other players start to follow suit with the shorter term. But I think for just pure value wise, that kind of has to be thrown out because it's just not representative of really where the market's going.
And then in the short term with the Robertson stuff, because obviously for those that are just joining or listening, obviously you guys are at the 12/8 kind of projection. How dangerous or risky or whatever term you want to use is that potential arbitration case from a team perspective?
So the one player that we kind of looked at as, okay, if this doesn't go long term, where's the comp? We came up with Mark Stone quite a few years ago, but that translates to like a $9.3 million cap hit still. So that's like 1 year. It's not going to be great because he's clearly probably will be the best player ever to go to arbitration if that occurs. So I don't know what type of case the team's going to be able to make against him because arbitration is all about presenting comparable players. I don't know who the team's going to pull out to say, yeah, he's not that good.
And that's the argument for not going to arbitration a lot of times for teams too, is that it's not just about getting to a number. It's about kind of the hidden cost of having to sewer a guy publicly, or at least not publicly, but like, you know, players' feelings tend to get hurt when you come out of that room, because that's the way you get the value down as low as you possibly can and argue for your number, which just makes it undesirable. Sometimes just the time investment too, right? You have to prep for the whole thing. GMs don't want to have to prep for that whole hearing and do it usually during the summer when they'd rather be at a cottage or whatever. So there's lots of incentive on the team side not to go to arbitration, which like you mentioned, means a player like Robertson has even more leverage because it's not even about what number he might get out of that. It's just about going to arbitration, like you said, especially as an unprecedented sort of player going to it. That's a big unknown and a lot of potential cost for what comes out of that. I also, I don't know if this is your purview, Kyle, but like, to me, the last thing on, like, the Stars probably don't want to go to arbitration with Robertson for a number of reasons, but especially because once you get to that number, boom, then he's got his ticket for UFA a year from now. It seems to me, it makes way more sense for them to either agree to an extension or trade him. And frankly, even trade him before arbitration would happen. So another team gets to do that. Could you see a scenario, but I can't see a scenario where they would trade him to another team without an extension in place, because he's the sort of player, like you said, that's so valuable. No team is going to spend assets to get him and then put themselves in that risky position of going to arbitration, signing him to a 1 year, not locking him up. So I actually don't know if there's any way he gets to arbitration for anyone this year, really.
I would full on agree. I think the only way is if there's kind of like a backroom deal already worked out. But even then, I don't think you go arbitration. I think you do a 1 year and then be like, here's the and then the extension's announced January 1st when they can first announce it type thing. the other thing to kind of keep in mind that's an interesting dynamic. So I agree. I think it's either he's not with the organization or he's on a long-term 8-year contract. Is this offseason's last where the max term is 8 years.
Mhm.
So once we get past this offseason, the best the teams, even if he stayed in Dallas, they can do is 7 years. And if he's not signed to an extension and traded, so no sign and trade takes place, the other team can at best do just 7 years. So there is an incentive for a team to pony up the assets potentially, because if he hits unrestricted free agency next offseason, yeah, you don't have to pay the assets, but now you're only at 6 years and probably paying a much higher average annual value as well.
Well, would they do that 1 year on Robertson's side? What incentive would his camp have to do? Let's say the Stars say, look, we're in a cap crunch this year, but then next year we can go up to 14 or whatever the crazy number is. I don't know. Like, again, wouldn't that almost be cap circumvention, really? And I don't know how the league would look on it if you signed the 1 year and then the extension on January 1st, because by all accounts, the team would be putting themselves in an incredibly risky position, unless they have that backroom deal. I guess that's my question. I know, Sean, I'm totally dominating the Q&A here because I'm really interested in what Kyle's saying here, but how realistic is a scenario like that? Because people have asked me about that, and my response has usually been, that's a really hard scenario for me to envision for those reasons.
I think I fully agree. Like, I don't think it's what happens. I think that they need to come to some sort of long-term resolution, whether that's pony up the contract now or send him out the door for assets. I think once they sign Thomas Harley to that extension, they kind of back themselves in the corner with Robertson.
Mhm.
Because I think if you were going to find some wiggle room, it was with Harley, because you have a little bit more of a runway to work with. So I don't think that that's really an option. I think if I'm Dallas, I think that's incredibly risky. And if I'm Robertson's camp at that point, it's like, great. The fact that you still can't commit to me, it's not my problem that you're kind of screwed yourself up with your salary cap. I'm not gonna sign up. I'm not gonna agree to this, to even like the backroom type. Oh yeah, I'll sign the 7 later on. I'm going to test unrestricted free agency because I'm sure someone will pay me a lot of money there.
Did you guys have Harley at a lower number? Just really quick, then I'll toss it to Sean.
Yeah.
Did you have him a lower number than he ended up getting at that 10.4 or whatever it is?
I think that was pretty close. I don't have it right in front of me, but I don't think that was out of line with what we expected on a long term. But on a short term contract, yeah, we're talking $3-4 million probably saved for a couple years. That was the avenue I think we would have recommended at the time, is Harley short term, get past the next couple years, wait for Tyler Sagan's number to come off the books, and now you have Robertson locked up, and then you can revisit Harley. I think the risk there was Harley's number at the time you thought was going to continue going up.
Yeah.
He maybe didn't have quite the season that would have dictated that, so kind of risking that short-term contract might have actually paid off for the team, but that's hindsight.
Yep. And he's younger too, so the long term. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely good, Robert. The two I have two things that are popping in mind for me, Kyle, right now. One is, because obviously one of the narratives about all this time in this time of year when you talk about signing players, and Robertson is the big one, and people always talk about, well, and he did score in the playoffs this year, but it's always, what about the playoffs? What about the playoffs? What about the playoffs? Right. And so I'm curious for you guys, when you look at numbers and things, is it how much do or don't the playoffs matter when it comes to looking at these projections? And then the other thing, just from a Dallas perspective, for me becomes obviously the other one. And I don't know if you've done the Maverick Bork one yet, but he's another fascinating case with this Stars cap situation.
So we use pretty much regular season data, and the fact that we're trying to get these out within early to mid-May this year, we're probably early next week when they're released. But we can't full on factor in the playoffs, because if whoever we start with come the day after the regular season ends, we have to treat the last player we run a projection for exactly the same. Sometimes we'll go back at the very end and be like, oh, Aiden Hill is absolutely carrying Vegas to a Stanley Cup. Okay, let's maybe bump that up a little bit. But we're generally looking at the regular season also because just pure sample size, there's a lot more data there versus the relatively small postseason. Obviously, the Stars have a little bit more postseason sample than some teams over the past few years. And frankly, if Jason Robertson's getting moved or signed elsewhere, someone else is signing him, not necessarily for the playoffs. It's to probably make the playoffs and put them over. So generally speaking, we're factoring in just regular season performances. Every so often we'll go back and be like, yeah, maybe it's a bump. Or at the end of the postseason, I think last year we kind of just put a list out. Yeah, we're probably going to be low on like these three guys because of how good they did in the postseason, but kind of is what it is. But we're really trying to base it off of regular season performance. Bork, we're kind of still a little bit in the process of. I think short term there makes a lot of sense. We did run them. We do have a comparable list. And looking at one of the comparables on the short term list in particular that stands out is Luke Evangelista recently with Nashville last offseason, 3 years, $3 million. I know there might be a little bit, maybe not position line up perfectly, but I think for potential role and everything, plus that no income tax situation hasn't fully arrived. I know Bork did have a little bit better kind of finish to the season, but hasn't fully put it together. So maybe going short plus the Stars cap crunch. Otherwise, if they go long term, it's probably pushing 5.5 to 6 million on maybe about a 5-6 year contract, I think is what we are looking at. Is it doable? Sure, but you haven't seen quite. Usually I full on advocate for the long-term contract because it usually works out better for the team. But given their cap situation and still not seeing a player that's fully arrived, I think you have to be a little bit hesitant to commit the term to him.
It's a little bit too with a younger player who has a lot of RFA years still left. That is a situation where going 1 year maybe isn't as risky for I mean, obviously not having UFA next summer, but even so, I mean, they did 1 year with him last year, right? And I could see an argument where he and his agent might say, hey, we just hit 20 goals this year. Yes, even though not everything's there, maybe we try to go for that Logan Stankoven deal, let's say, this year and get that about, I think it was 6 million or whatever you said, pretty much.
Yeah.
Whereas the team might, on the other hand, say, you know what, it's a risk, and maybe you hit 25 next year, and then you're asking for 6x7 or 6x8 or something. But it seems to me that there's more motivation when a player is earlier in their RFA years to get more information before committing, unless it's a player that you feel really, really solidly that, hey, that the upside is so big that any long-term deal is ultimately going to benefit us. Is that fair to say?
I think that's usually fair to say. I think generally the more sample that a player can output does benefit them, at least from saying, hey, this is what I've done. The more you've done, the more you can justify being paid. But if you haven't really shown sustained success and the team's still kind of wavering, like there's only so much you're going to go up. Like the extra 500,000 to $1 million per year under a higher cap is really not going to make a big difference. If I think you, as you said, saw the potential rate early on, saw that it was clearly clicking, clearly an impact player for multiple years. Yeah, you go the long term out of the gate because there are some long-term cap savings opportunities. But if you're worried about just a $500,000 increase over a year, it's probably not worth it as a team. Get the more information, feel like you've made a more informed decision there.
My recollection is like a decade ago, Riley Smith, I think with Boston, it was pretty quickly after he'd been traded there. There were some rumblings that he had signed like a 1 year, very low, surprisingly low dollar deal as an RFA. And a lot of people were saying it was because Boston was in a cap crunch and they had basically done the kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing. Like, hey, we'll take care of you next year, almost regardless of what you do this year, even though technically you can't do that, right? If nothing's signed, it's not a deal. But that probably happens on some level though, right? Like between GMs and play, not even necessarily like, illegally or anything, just kind of that understanding of this is what we can do, but this is what we will do?
I'm sure, I know that there's got to be a few examples. I have another couple off that I kind of in my mind, but I'm not going to necessarily throw them out to call anyone out. But yeah, it definitely happens. But I mean, the player's going to understand the cap situation, and at some points, it's just mutually beneficial to just wait 1-2 years, and it's like, well, you're going to have more space, the cap's going to be higher, I'm going to perform better. Yeah, it's a win-win all round at that point. So why not?
What you talk about, we're talking about sample size, and the other one that's fascinating for me this summer, Darren Radish, 143 career points, 70 of them in this season. He's 29 years old. Like, how do you kind of start to slice that one? Because that's one where age and time aren't on the player's side. And from a team perspective, how do you kind of look at, well, as I just said, you got 143 career points. 70 of them were this past season.
I think the answer for him in particular, and just this offseason in general, supply and demand is really. So when we had run our midseason projections, the only team that he's can sign with is Tampa. So we had him at a pretty modest, like 5.5 average annual value at that point. Because if he's signing that contract at that time with the Tampa Bay Lightning, that's probably where it's coming in, because they're not going to pay him probably much more than that. But the minute he hits the free agent market on July 1st, he's going to have multiple teams calling regardless of what he's done, because there's just going to be a need for his skill set, the position he plays. And all it takes is one or two teams willing to pay a very high amount, and they don't care about sample size at that point. They're going to have cap space to spend at that point. Again, it's looking at who's available this offseason, I think, and saying, okay, sample size does matter, but so does the sample of the crop, the supply, demand relative to everything, and he's probably going to be accurate in the on defense. I paid AB yet. Well, he played really well. Can talk them on later in his if in this offseason or two this.
Well, Dono, who they also them. Surely the supply actual contract and projection exceeded what
oodles of for one reason.
Projections. I'd love to go with Seattle. Brain is someone who goes from a no to one because we're talking about the over $1 million. It changes the complex of it. So I wanted to go there with you.
So I believe it is basically starting for starting in 2028. The employers would, believe, start to withhold relative to that, which means the tax returns filed in 2029 would reflect that. I haven't gotten into our updates so one of the things that my off-season project, well, I guess now season project, so is a tax calculator to basically plug in values. Okay, here's a contract. What's the player's situation? Where do they live? What team are they going to sign on? What's it worth after taxes? How much are they putting in their pocket? And then compare that to one other team, the rest of the league, compare like, okay, if they reside in the state or whatever. So I haven't gotten to those updates quite yet, but it's going to matter, but it's also what's called a marginal tax, meaning the first $1 million are still taxed at zero.
Oh, okay. I did not know.
So
Okay.
every dollar over $1 million is where the tax starts to kick in. So if you're looking at a $2 million player, I think it was at 9 or 10%. I don't remember off the top of my head that Washington's going to impose. So let's just say 10%, easy numbers here. At 2 million, they're really only paying like 5% because the first million's is taxed at zero, and then the next million is taxed at the 10%. So effectively it's only 5, which is in line with most other states at that point. So it's gonna impact some of the much higher earners, but the ones on kind of the marginal type contracts, it will matter. It takes them out of the no, but it probably puts them more in line with a lot of the other average kind of situations until you start getting the $10 million contracts. Then that's where it might be a little bit more of a consideration.
Is there a point where I think I've had this conversation with you before? I think one of the reasons that the NHL, I personally believe one of the reasons we hear so much about the tax-free versus not tax state in the NHL is because of where the salaries are, right? Like at the end of the day, if we're talking about an NFL quarterback making $55 million versus $50 million, no one wants to hear anyone complaining about that, right? Like I'm curious from your perspective. Obviously, it's always going to be something that's looked at on the back end and talked about here and there. You talked about earlier Kaprizov and players eventually going to have to start pushing it. What's the eventual kind of money line where we stop hearing people talk about tax versus tax-free salary-wise? Because no one talks about it in the NBA, right? Like no one talks about how much money the LeBron is getting taxed to play for the Lakers versus what Wemby's getting taxed to play for the San Antonio Spurs, right? So like what's the number in your mind where all of a sudden it becomes, well, the NHL players are making this much money, so we don't really care for people. This isn't a talking point anymore.
I think when you're starting to talk 10 to 20 million, because then you're still putting 5 to 10 in your pocket every single year. And that's in like the worst case scenario. I don't think we're going to feel too sorry at that point. But when we're talking someone getting hit with, again, I don't want to sound like I'm overly like, I would love to just get one of those paychecks into my bank account.
Yeah.
But when you're talking only making like 2-3 million, paying 40 to 50% to taxes, you still are paying your agent, you're still having to pay trainers in the off season and investing in probably a diet and workout program. Like that's not inexpensive. So when you're kind of netting out how much they're actually making each year, it's plenty to live off of, but it's not like they're being able to build generational wealth to say, okay, when my playing career is over, I'm done. When we're talking $5 to $10 million a year at the end of a playing career, you're probably set financially for life. that might be kind of the difference there is when is there enough money being made each year to set them up to not have to worry about post hockey earnings, at least. I think the other thing, kind of tongue in cheek, but also kind of true, is when the teams in no income state taxes are not winning Stanley Cups year in and year out. I think that's the big thing driving the narrative is a lot of the sustained success is coming from those teams in those states. If that starts to change, the narrative might change a little bit as well.
Yeah, no one was talking about how unfair it was that the Florida Panthers were getting all the free agents in 2018. that was not quite the narrative then. Okay, last one for me, I think, although a lot of stuff's coming up because this is fascinating. I'm curious, Kyle, have you had a contract that you guys projected and maybe when that projection came out, people were like, no, that's way off, or, oh, wow, look at these guys. And then it ended up being almost spot on, that you're like, is there a projection that you're particularly proud of or that you think you guys kind of nailed that maybe a lot of people didn't? Or maybe people did. It doesn't have to be about other people's opinion, but is there one that you're particularly proud of or that kind of told you, you know what, our model is kind of doing its thing and we're accounting for all the big stuff here?
Oh, that I don't know if I have a perfect victory lap to take right now, but
maybe the answer is all of them every year, and that's why people should be so excited about these productions coming out later this month.
I think it's the one we miss on more often. Like we've been after the Flyers swept the Penguins, not swept, but had a great series. Our mentions were a disaster because Dan Vladar in the offseason, we did not like that contract at all. We thought that it was much high. The market value that the Flyers paid was much above the performance that he had shown up until that point. And we had expressed that. And then we have a bunch of Flyers fans coming and saying, oh, well, what about now? It's like, we don't really care about what happened at the time. It's really what was the case at the time. At the time, they paid more than the market seemingly was dictating. Hey, great for them that it worked out. Great for the player that he got his money, but we're not necessarily, I mean, we care a little bit how the contract ages, but it's really about the process getting to the value and getting to everything more so than worrying about how, if the player is worth it or not, because we joke all the time when we're doing like our podcast or putting these out. It's like, we wouldn't necessarily sign this contract, but that's probably what he's getting in the open market. And that's ultimately what we're doing, is we're trying to get to that number, not necessarily what we would do. So kind of once the dust is settled on the signing of the contract, we don't really care what happens. Like, we hope all players do well. We hope they get paid more. But yeah, our assessment is the process of the teams coming to those values and us coming to those values independently.
The Vladar one actually connects well to my question. I'm curious on something because I'm looking at these playoffs right now, and other than really Anaheim, there's not really one team that has gone with, hey, this is the number one with a bullet guy in goal, right? Like, obviously the Dobish story has been great in Montreal, where we're seeing more and more, and that's part of the evolution of the position. And we had a fascinating conversation with Bruce Boudreau last week where he said, looking back at his time in Anaheim, maybe there's times he should have switched goalies in the playoffs a little bit more. With that position, I'm curious how you kind of look at the evolution of usage for that, and especially with now the 1A, 1B, there's very few teams where there's such a gap in performance between 1A and 1B anymore, right? Like, the whole reality, like, obviously Robert and I talk a lot about Dallas things and everything, and I don't think Jake Ottinger is a better goalie than Casey DeSmith. He's not a $7.25 million goalie better than Casey DeSmith. And obviously it works well where Dallas is able to get both under that $9.5 million range. How's the evolution? And you look at that position and smart spending versus projections and everything like that. And obviously Vladar's in mind because he just brought him up. But how do you look at that? Because this is always a fascinating topic for me.
Yeah, we generally aren't projecting, like, the sample for goalies pushing high is very, very small. I think philosophically, I teams should probably budget the exact same amount across the board, and whether they pay their starter 10 and their backup 2 getting to 14 or 2, I wouldn't necessarily recommend paying 14, but like if you're paying 2 6s or a 12 and a 1, like that's what you should allocate to the goalie, but you better make sure the high end ones are absolutely worth it. I don't know if we have this offseason. There's definitely no one, and I don't think next offseason as well, that there's anyone that's going to even push into that kind of upper echelon. And every single offseason, we kind of start to see, oh, Jeremy Swayman's pulling things forward, and then then another goalie will sign, and it's like, oh, we're back down a little bit. I think we have seen a little bit of progress. I think last offseason, or was it 2 off seasons ago, Buffalo had signed Luukkonen to his extension, and then a couple more Decord, maybe. I think Dostal was last year. I'm getting my years mixed up, but like those kind of goalies started to push up just a little bit more than had traditionally kind of happened. So I think it's being pushed up a little bit, but it's definitely marginally compared to top 6 forwards, top 4 defensemen, even bottom pair defensemen at this point. If you shoot on the right side and have some penalty kill or power play ability for the most part, and you're big on the blue line, your salary's definitely getting pushed up a lot more than the goaltending salary. And I think a lot of teams are subscribing to the, here's our budget for goalies, let's allocate what most likely equally or like a 60-40 to that position, and that's it.
I think, Sean, I believe you and I have both talked about how some team execs different from around the league have said in the past that a rising cap tends to disproportionately benefit exactly those sorts of players. Like Kyle was saying, like it doesn't mean every player necessarily gets their salary bumped. It's the high end guys, and usually it's those high end forwards and maybe top pairing defensemen. For goalies in particular, though, I wonder, because it seems like, you'll have Carey Price for a long, long time. That 10-5 was the marker. And then I think Shesterkin was it 2 years ago? He got 11-5, but you say, who knows if anyone else is going to get that? I wonder if for goalies, it might actually work the other way, where because it seems like fewer and fewer teams are going with a definitive, like this is our 12 guy and this is our 1 guy. Like it's going to more and more of an even split, where the mid-range goalies like the Dan Villadars or whoever are going to have a higher number in there. So teams don't necessarily throw all their eggs in one basket just to diminish risk, so that we see a higher growth in the mid-range goalies as opposed to the top end, even as the cap continues to skyrocket. Does that seem at least possible to you?
I think that's probably spot on. And I almost wonder across the board. So yeah, you kind of referenced that the top guys are the ones getting the percent of cap and pushing it. But one of the things that I've kind of started to just anecdotally look at, and probably going to put some numbers to it this offseason, is so many, and we started talking about it early on, so many players are 8-year, 7-8 year contracts. At some point, there's not going to be a top guy for a team to give top dollars to, but the cap's going to continue increasing and increasing and increasing, and there's a minimum that each team's going to have to spend. So how are they going to get to that floor each year? Are they going to go overpay? They don't have a top guy to go overpay. Is it going to be a middle guy, or are they going to go overpay, relatively speaking, a couple depth guys and start to, so now the 4th line floor is higher, and the bottom pair defense floor is higher, and the goalie floor is higher, and it's a lot, and guys are starting to creep up to be more equal. It's kind of, where's that allocation going to fall? And I think at some point, I've kind of been saying, like, it's a little bit of a salary cap bubble is going to kind of burst, and someone's going to get a lot more money. Some group of players is going to get a lot more money than it's necessarily anticipated. Probably not necessarily this offseason, but the next couple, especially as these top names continue to up for 6, 7, 8 years. Supply demand, the supply in the market's going to be going down. Demand's still going to be there, but now there's a factor of money has to be spent. Where's that money going to go?
What is the when you kind of look at that perspective, And I don't know a ton about the NBA, but didn't we have something like that with the NBA too, where there was that overinflation of the NBA depth bench player because, hey, the money's got to go somewhere?
That I don't follow the NBA
Yeah.
too closely either, but I remember probably about 10 years ago at this point, that's exactly right. As people were saying, oh, this player is getting a max contract. Like everyone's getting a max contract because there was just no one else to give that money to. So, well, I'll overpay this guy because he's at least good.
What's this year? We'll look at the playoffs right now. And I'm maybe I'm being unfair to Ryan Lomberg in this, but who's your favorite for the Ryan Lomberg of this playoffs? Who's going to go from a guy who is a not entry level, but minimum salary guy who's going to have just a playoff run is going to turn them into a actual cap ledger piece as opposed to more than just a depth signing?
Think Parker Kelly, Colorado might be a good answer for that one. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Maybe one of the guys in Vegas as well that they had acquired at they kind of rebuilt their fourth line. That's a potential. I think my gut reaction is Parker Kelly's probably the answer. No one else necessarily is coming to mind. Buffalo, most of their guys are not. I guess Peyton Krebs potentially is a name there that's going, but he's a restricted free agent, so not necessarily in the open market. Beck Malenstein, Buffalo hasn't necessarily excelled, like been phenomenal in the playoffs where he gets more of a payday. Just at this point, the number of teams that are, I guess, still left, Mark Jankowski would have been maybe a good answer here, but he just re-signed with Carolina a couple of days ago. So I don't necessarily have anyone off the top of my head that's besides Parker Kelly that really stands out in my mind. Maybe someone in Minnesota if they have a comeback against Colorado, but a lot of their bottom lineup guys are the Felinos who are kind of locked in regardless, and then Nico Sturm or like Michael McCarron. But I think McCarron might be up for a contract, but I think that might be the only other. I think he's the only other kind of possibility potentially for that.
I know I've played kind of my own personal game of 20 questions here with you, so this will be my last one, I promise, Kyle. But on the other side of that, is there a team in the league where you see them kind of constantly, they're probably doing their own, I mean, every team I'm sure is doing their own projection work and stuff in-house to try to have a good feel for the market. But is there a team that, and is the answer just always Carolina, but is there a team that tends to be ahead of the game when it comes to a lot of these deals where they just consistently avoid making some or putting themselves in the position to have to make the mistakes that some other teams end up having to make?
Carolina's definitely one that does really well. So it's identifying when to sign them and giving them the proper term that I think Carolina does really, really well, like getting Jackson Blake, Stan Coven, identifying Keandre Miller as someone that can come into their system and excel, and then locking him up to a very lucrative contract, but at the same point, one that's probably going to age very well based off of how well he's played. That's definitely a team that I've looked at over the past couple of years. Dallas usually does pretty well coming in below our projections. Maybe that's leveraging the no state income tax. Florida has done usually pretty well coming in. Again, there's probably things that they're leveraging. Shockingly, Vegas is not necessarily an obvious answer. Like they're usually kind of right around market value, and then some of the other no income tax state teams are actually kind of on the higher end. So it's not necessarily just the taxes, but I think that those teams, and even I think Tampa Bay doesn't do as well as over the years as maybe is perceived of them. I think they really messed up some of those, like the Kucherov, like the long-term contract for Kucherov, Point, Cernak in particular, and then Sergachev, who they end up trading out. I think they kind of could have managed those better to have them on team friendlier deals for a while. And not that they don't leverage the no tax thing, but there's times that their deals are coming in very much market value. So I think the ones that I like that generally do pay less than what we're projecting market wise. Carolina, Dallas, and maybe Colorado would probably be the three that I would kind of give the AFP Analytics projection award to.
It's that those teams to be the ones that have played more playoffs than any other teams over the past couple of years. That's what we were saying earlier about that situation. No one caring about the Florida Panthers when they weren't winning games.
Sean, you might have cut out there for a second.
Nope. Okay.
Yeah, getting a little garbly. Something about the Florida Panthers at the end. So if you can wrap some tinfoil, wrap your router in tinfoil for a second, and then repeat your question. Still a little garbly.
We got the rain is starting right now, so that's probably.
Oh yeah, the Midwestern weather. You're always going to blame the weather. I see. Force majeure when it comes to Wi-Fi. I didn't know that was a thing.
I was working. The fact was that it's those teams tend to have one.
Still, Kyle, did you catch that? I didn't.
No, I think something about no tech states and doing well, but
yeah.
Okay.
We turned the video off for a second. Did that
there we
work?
go. That's a little better. Yeah, a little better. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's wow. It's the moment's been lost. Continue.
Okay. Well, the only other thing I'll say about that is the Brock Nelson contract, Kyle, because you mentioned Colorado. That's one where at the time, because they signed that, and then the Stars signed, I think, Matt Duchene. So you have different players, obviously. Nelson much better defensively, but how much of that increased defensive value really is caught up in that Nelson contract? Because to me, especially now that he's in another playoff run where he's not exactly lighting the world on fire, I don't know that defensive numbers really end up, to put it bluntly, I don't think teams really end up paying too much for defense most of the time, right? Like if you are paying a lot for defense, you're probably on the wrong side of the market as a team most of the time, right?
Most likely. I mean, this is where I would think teams have their own internal metrics and analytics that we as a public aren't necessarily capturing. But ironically, the Nelson contract was definitely a little bit above our projection, but it wasn't like, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. We can debate the asset management going into that and everything, but pure contract in a vacuum wasn't terrible. But I think I agree. Teams aren't. I mean, their players are still getting paid based off of their box score numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it comes down to. So defense is still not overly reflected. And I think the smart teams are identifying players that have traits that either work well defensively or are going to at least fit their system well. And maybe they're paying a little bit more to make sure they secure the player. But I think that's where the market inefficiency probably is. Fully agree that the defense isn't what's necessarily captured, because you look at bottom six forwards who are great defensively, they're still only getting paid 3.5 million per season, but their impacts are probably more than the guy who scored 30 but is a defensive liability.
Pursuant to that, while Sean's sorting out his Wi-Fi, there are teams. I know the Florida Panthers were kind of famous for not like giving anyone in their bottom like fourth line and maybe even one or two third liners like more than basically 900K. Like they're looking for a lot of like they're very much loading up, putting all of their financial muscle into the top of their lineup, and then forcing themselves basically, we are not gonna to go much above league min for any of these guys at the bottom end of the lineup. Obviously, the cap going up, that's probably less of an imperative now, but hard to argue with the results of that approach, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, a team that's using metrics that we maybe as a public don't necessarily have access to, and looking at how their system plays and looking at their just everything related to the internal analytics and the tracking data that they must have, that's where teams can give themselves an advantage by just identifying proper traits that are going to translate And okay, yeah, maybe they're paying a minimum for that, but they feel more comfortable plugging that guy into their lineup because they know he's going to work because they've identified something that will work for him.
That makes sense. Sean, how are you doing?
I think
I don't.
Yep.
I don't think it is. I'm
Great.
so sorry. I don't think it is. Okay, Sean, try a last question. I think we have enough bandwidth. Do you have any last questions for Kyle before we let him go? As much fun as this is.
I think we're anywho. I don't know. I'm gonna trust Robert to ask the last questions.
Okay. Okay. Kyle, what's the thing we didn't ask? What's the thing about projections that people don't understand about taxes that we should have asked, or that people always miss when they come into these conversations and they think, oh, I'm talking to the analytics cap projection guy, I'm going to impress him with what I know. What's the one thing that you always have to patiently explain to people without sounding condescending?
I think it's really understanding how players are paid in the NHL. And I've referenced it recently already, but just because the player has potential doesn't mean you need to pay for that potential. And also, just because you think that you can get a player on a cheaper contract because of A, B, and C, well, if he scored 35, 40 goals, I think we had some Vegas fans coming after us for Pavel Dorofeev in like the midseason or like off season. Like, you're saying he's going to get paid how much? Well, he did something very few players in the league did goal scoring wise. It's just going to pay off eventually. So I think it's understanding what still drives contracts, how the negotiations are done behind the scenes, what teams, what agents are still using. So even though we're using this like analytics and everything, and teams are definitely using them internally, when teams and players sit down to negotiate, we're not necessarily talking about expected goals, or they're not necessarily talking about expected goals.
Yeah.
We might be talking about their on ice expected goals impact, but they only scored 15 and they're minus 15. Well, that's not going to help them get a contract, or at least a high value contract. So I think that's the big thing. And then the other thing I'll emphasize is tax. We kind of alluded to it, but taxes definitely matter. But the reality is the teams that are good attract players because they want to win. And then living situation matters as well. But I don't know.
Yes.
We've made it in.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, living situation matters as well. You were saying, Kyle? Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's a lot what dictating why a player is going to sign a contract with a particular team. So we shouldn't just boil it down to the fact that, oh, there's no state income tax, or, oh, they're getting paid more to go here. There's a lot of reasons why contracts happen. So even like when we're doing our analysis, yeah, we try and boil it down very simply, very bluntly sometimes, but like there's so many factors that go into why a team and player have agreed to a certain contract. And
Yeah.
And ultimately it's about the player and their family feeling comfortable. And that's what really matters, is players are still humans, even though they get paid lots of money.
Yeah. I sometimes think that we treat from the outside as people who aren't fortunate enough to be either writing these checks or cashing them, that we treat the contract numbers kind of like statistics, in that, oh, it's really cool if the team gets this number for this value, just like it's cool if a player hits 300 or a player scores 20 goals or whatever. But that number means very, very different things when you're talking about a team, a player, his family, his livelihood, his career, like you talked about, wealth, stability, security. All of those things are very different. It's not just about, oh yeah, it'd be nice to hit that number. That they sometimes have very specific things that they're looking for that aren't captured in that. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and sometimes I hate boiling it down to like putting out projections and talking about everything like it's a commodity, a asset being traded on the stock market, because it's not. It's a person who has a very real situation. So I think talking about clauses and why players might want a clause and them being willing to exercise that clause to stay in a situation, I think they should be commended, not necessarily pressured into agreeing to something just because that benefits the team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate Robert, by the way, being able to handle that whole debacle of went through. So add that to the producer notes for next week, Robert, because this was, I don't know what the heck happened. And I blame one Midwestern thunderstorm rolled through and then the entire, everything decided to completely shut down. I don't have any more questions because Robert went through and tackled everything. I just wanted to say, first off, apologize to Kyle for handling what helped with what happened with me there. But really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate you providing some clarity, some teaching on everything. And also, I just want to say the tools you guys put out are such a valuable tool. And I think it's such a cool thing to see that I really hope for those who, if you're using these numbers to come out Monday, I believe, right, Kyle, is kind of the plan right now?
That's the hope.
The hope is Monday. Yep.
The hope is Monday.
My one piece on this is that when those things come out, I hope that the people who are using your numbers and everything like that are given the proper credit to you guys, because you guys do put together such an awesome service and that help a lot of people understand where things may or may not go. So
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks. And AFP Analytics on social website, where can people find you, Kyle?
All of the above. We're most kind of active on Xtel, Blue Sky, Threads, in that order. AFPanalytics.com is where our contract projections will go live. We have base projections that will be available free for public use. And then we have kind of went to a little bit of a tiered premium model where you get a little bit of the tax goods and the comparable players for a small subscription. But all that's on AFPanalytics.com. We have a few other things, and we're always trying to look to add more kind of content, pushing it forward. So, and then our podcast is Max Term Podcast. We haven't recorded an episode in a little while as we've been working on projections, but hopefully once projections are live, we'll also talk about them more there too.
All right. Well, again, like Sean said, thank you very much for all your time today. I'll make sure to tell any Stars fans to yell at you if Jason Robertson's contract doesn't end up making them happy, whatever it is and wherever it gets signed.
Yeah, because we'll definitely control that for sure. Just like the weather in the Midwest.
Yeah. Sean was going to blame you for that too. I'm glad you got out in front of it. It's good. All right.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
You got it anytime. Appreciate it.
All right. There he goes. Kyle Stitch, AFP Analytics, very patient with both weather, technology, and math. I don't know about you, Sean. I learned a lot about just how these things are looked at. I appreciated him adding to the context about what it is when like how teams and players still aren't really using all of the numbers that the public people might want to use when projecting, which is also a different project, by the way. Like a team getting to a number, I'm sure internally they're talking about their projections and what a player, who the good bets are and when they think a player will start to decline or if he's already declining. But it's also the case that there's a number that actually is going to make the player happy, that's going to make the player feel respected. Like even how you go about those negotiations has to happen a certain way through the agent and everything too. So it's not as simple as, just throwing up the metrics and the comparables and the aging curves and saying, okay, well, this is what we think we should pay you based on what we can do. It's usually a little bit more nuanced conversation than that. It sounds like, even if the numbers themselves aren't always as nuanced as we might wish they were.
Yeah. I hope that I can be heard right now. Can I be heard right now?
Yeah, you're fine. Good.
That's first off,
video's a little choppy, but that's okay. We're on the exit ramp here, so
we're
that's
on
fine.
The exit ramp, and you did a great job handling that. And we will take a look into add to the producer note, and we will probably just look into plugging this thing in directly into the wall, just getting rid of the router, probably just plugging into the wall, or just holding a long stick into the air and then sending you questions via snail mail so you can handle it.
I just got a LAN cable at our pal Stephen Meserve actually recommended I get one because sometimes Pressbox Wi-Fi, as we know, isn't always the best in a lot of NHL markets, and certainly whether it's in Dallas or Texas, especially if it's the playoffs and you have a crowded field in terms of devices using the Wi-Fi, plugging in directly with a LAN cable or Cat5 or whatever it's called. I just call it a LAN cable. I don't know if there's a technical term, but that has actually been of great benefit to me since I got that. So yes, that might help. I don't know. I'm not the tech support guy, but I would assume that might help. But either way, that was cool. It all worked out. And I mean, our booking agent once again got a crack guest.
At least that's the one thing I've done well, is I've been able to book guests as well. So awesome for Kyle to be here. We will be back next week. I hopefully will have better internet next week. Robert, I really quickly having this show.
Sean, really quickly, give me your hot take. What do you think is going to happen with Jason Robertson? Given all this, given the numbers, the 12x8, if the Stars wanted to go 12x8, feels like probably that would have been signed. I can't imagine that Robertson's holding out for like 15, but then again, genuinely, who knows, right? We don't know what his camp wants. Do you have any sort of like, not even gut feeling, just a guess? But I mean, Jason Robertson, as a player and as a person pretty well, having covered him for a long time. So I'm just curious what you think.
I have a feeling that this is I think this is going to get done. And I think this is going to, if I had to be a betting man on this, which I wouldn't be, but if I had to be a betting man on this, I think it's going to start with 12, but I don't think it's going to end with 0-0. I think it's like, I think that's going to be the solution here, is when you look at the market and you look at the value, I think Jason wants the 8 years. So I think that's important. Kyle brought that up. So I think the 8 years is going to be important. And so I also think there's an ego at play with sports. If, hey, I'm the only guy scoring in the playoffs, I'm the one that's your 100-point scorer. Is it 12-5? Is it 12-7-5? I don't know. But I think that's where a deal like this ends up getting done. And I think that's and I don't think that's completely unfair. Obviously, Kyle said they have it at 12. I do think from Robertson's perspective, does that mean you have to make a tough decision with an Ilya Lyubushkin and a Radek Faksa, which you probably had to maybe make one of those tough decisions anyway? I think that might
I'd
be.
I'd still bet they move Steele before Faksa. I just don't.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think so. I know. I mean, you never know. And if Bork, let's say for some reason, they think he's going to be closer to 3, which they really can't do. Like even him at 2 is kind of a squeeze for them right now. No. So there's a world where they have to do all 3, but then again, you're replacing a lot of guys with they already don't have enough scoring in their bottom 6.
Bork is tough. Bork's tough case because I like Kyle said, obviously they still had to run all the numbers on it. I'm interested to see what they have next week, but the 3 million AAV is going to be interesting to see what that does. So.
Well, he probably is more of a, even if he's not necessarily a prime offer sheet candidate, he's not a 4 first-round picks type offer sheet candidate. So another team could certainly. He's not someone that I think you want to go to arbitration with and qualify and go that route for that exact reason. So I think it makes a lot more sense for them to lock up Bork, even if it's for 1 year, just because that route has that other risk. Even if it's a small risk, there's still any sort of risk GMs don't tend to like. So, okay, well, we'll see what happens. I appreciate you being willing to throw out kind of a dart on that one, but I tend to be of the same mind that it just, there's a lot more work that Dallas would have to do if you don't bring back Robertson. And I don't know that there's a Mikko Rantanen type trade or Marty Necas trade out there to kind of give you those assets in return. It's hard for me to see. You never know. You never know what some teams are thinking, but it's hard for me to see how they don't become worse next year if they trade Jason Robertson. And I don't think they want to be worse next year.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think there's anyhow. The show is Algorithmically Incorrect Hockey. We see the show and then the show on the way out. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week. We will have a guest or two. We don't know what. We will have 1 or 2 next week. We will look into. I will be going to Best Buy and or Circuit City if Circuit City still exists right now.
I don't think it does. Does it? I'm pretty sure Circuit City doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, I'm sure, and I will also make sure next week we will continue our Fast and Furious conversations as well.
Oh, excellent. I want an update every week on whatever iteration you're on. Okay, fair enough. All right. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.